Welcome back, MTN Giants Podcast. We have a lot to go over today, whether it's the Giants free agent signings. The Giants got a compensatory pick from Xavier McKinney's signing last year. There's a lot of quarterback drama with the Aaron Rodgers versus Russell Wilson thing. Seems like the Giants want Rodgers. Nobody knows what Rodgers is thinking right now. I saw pictures of him on a beach somewhere with a blanket around him and shades on. I don't know if it was a current picture or if it was old, but feels like he'll be a Steeler, but we're not exactly sure. It sucks we have to wait. Now Russell Wilson's visiting the Cleveland Browns coming up. Then he's visiting the Giants after. So this whole thing can get messy. So the quarterback situation, we'll touch on that. We'll touch on the Giants' big signings. They really put a lot of emphasis on their defense. The Giants have yet to make an offensive signing. I mean, they did re-sign some guys on offense, and more specifically Darius Slayton, but it was more on the defensive side of the ball. Kind of reminds you of 2016 when they had the big three defensive guys: Snacks Harrison, Janoris Jenkins, Olivier Vernon. It's kind of sort of like that. Not exactly the same type of money. That was way more. The Giants did spend a lot so far. We'll go over that at some point in this video. But it's Paulson Adebo, of course, the corner from the Saints, safety Javon Holland from the Dolphins, who I actually speculated about last video. And I'd never heard about him going to the Giants. It just felt like it would kind of make sense. So, the Giants ultimately did it. I thought they got a great price for him, so that's good to see. Chauncey Golston, who reminds me of kind of like Dorrance Armstrong from last year, a Dallas Cowboy pass rusher who probably should have played more and hopefully ends up being a good signing. Roy Robertson Harris, some defensive tackle depth. James Hudson III, offensive tackle. Another offensive tackle in Stone Forsythe, which I've heard some mixed reviews about him. I feel like in the past I have not heard good things about him, but we'll get to him later. So we'll go over those signings. We'll go over some other stuff, of course. But yeah, leave a like, subscribe, comment how you're thinking the Giants offseason's going so far, and let's get into it. I have the quarterback stuff written down first, so let's just go over it. So Adam Schefter today said that Rodgers is the number one option for Pittsburgh and the Giants, which makes a lot of sense. Russell Wilson seems to be the fallback for each team, so whichever team doesn't get Rodgers, most people are assuming that the team that doesn't get Rodgers gets Russ. But now there's this new wrinkle that came out today around 4 o'clock that Russell Wilson is visiting with the Cleveland Browns. And I know the Browns just traded for Kenny Pickett. I don't think they want to go into next year with Kenny Pickett and that's it, basically. I think they have like Bailey Zappi or something there as well. But Cleveland, they need a quarterback upgrade. Of course, they pick second overall. They could be a team that takes Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I wanted to make sure I got the dates right. So Russell Wilson is flying in tonight to Cleveland to visit with the Browns on Thursday. Then he's scheduled to meet with the Giants on Friday. So this is the second offseason in a row. Russell Wilson goes to the Giants facility. Assuming he gets there, of course, the Browns can blow him away, pause with an offer that he can't refuse, and that Giants meeting never happens. But hopefully the Giants have a chance to make their pitch and this time don't miss out. As I said before, I've been vocal about it. I prefer Aaron Rodgers, but I think if I'm at a point where you don't want to get too greedy if you're the Giants, right? You don't want to be in a position where you're just holding out for Rodgers, and then Rodgers either decides to retire or go elsewhere, whether it's the Vikings or the Steelers, and let's say Russell Wilson goes to Cleveland. In that situation, you're kind of screwed because the whole quarterback musical chairs thing is going on. There's only so many open seats left. There's Cleveland, which I mentioned, the Steelers, and the Giants. And there's two veteran quarterbacks left. Of course, there's the draft. Do you really want to draft Cam Ward and have him start from day one? I wouldn't. I think Cam Ward should get some time on the bench. I think Shedeur is a little more ready to start right away. I know Cam Ward has the better future outlook, but I just think that Shedeur is more NFL ready as of this moment. So at that point, do you just take Shedeur at 3? It's pretty nerve-wracking. My hope is that Rodgers announces soon, as soon as possible, like tonight or tomorrow, which it's annoying because I feel like Jordan Raanan tweeted this morning that Rodgers would have a decision today, and then other people said that it might take a few weeks. So it's I don't know what the hell to believe, and with Aaron Rodgers, it feels like everything is dragged on, and they try to make it as dramatic as possible. So it would be annoying if they missed out on Russell Wilson and Rodgers didn't end up as a Giant. They're in a bad spot, and especially if Cam Ward goes first overall to Tennessee, which Some people say that's likely, some people say it's not. And then if you're a person that is really against Shedeur Sanders, which I'm not, I do like Shedeur Sanders. I'd be fine taking him 3rd overall. That might be a bad take looking back on it, but as of right now, I think there's enough there to work with. But if you're a person opposite of me that does not believe in Shedeur Sanders at all, that might be your only chance. I mean, of course, there's the Joe Flaccos of the world out there. There's Carson Wentz. There's other guys you can sign to play quarterback next year, but nothing that's even relatively good. So it's getting a bit scary with the Giants and the quarterback 1 spot. I feel like Joe Schoen did a really good job, and I try to be fair. Look, overall, I have not been too satisfied with Joe Schoen, but it seems like so far in free agency, aside from the quarterback, which how much can you blame him? Because it's not like Joe Schoen he can't force Aaron Rodgers to make a decision right away. Of course, that's just going to take a while regardless. But I think on the defensive side of the ball, and even finding some value offensively and finding some offensive line depth, specifically at tackle, I think Shane's done a good job. So I will say, I mean, overall, big picture, not a big Shane guy, but I would say for the first 3 days of free agency, he's done a good job so far. I mentioned earlier, but the Giants were rewarded a 99th overall pick in this upcoming draft for Xavier McKinney going to the Packers last offseason on that big contract. What was it, 4 years and some crazy, I forget how much it was, but a lot of money, of course. A smart thing that Shane did, and once again, I'm kissing Shane's ass, look at me, but one thing he did that was smart, and I actually forgot that it worked out this way, and this was very smart. So when the Giants traded for Brian Burns last year, since he was not a free agent pickup, he was not counted towards the compensatory pick formula. I guess that's the best way to say it. So ultimately, yeah, if Brian Burns was signed for that amount of money that the Giants gave him, but in free agency, there probably is no comp pick. But the fact that they traded for Burns and then signed him to the big deal means he does not go into the comp pick formula. So honestly, looking at it from that perspective, it was a really smart move for Joe Schoen. I'm not sure if he thought it would work out that way last offseason, but if he did, because I don't think they mentioned that on Hard Knocks. Like, I don't think Joe Schoen made that trade for Brian Burns thinking, oh, well, for next year, that might work out in our favor for compensatory picks. Now, maybe he did, maybe I missed it, but maybe it's just random luck, I don't know, but overall, it seems like looking back on it in hindsight, that trading for Burns rather than having to sign him as a free agent, that right now seems like a very smart move. So kudos to Shane for that. There was a Will Fries report. Will Fries, the right guard who went to Minnesota. There was a report from, I think it was Ronan, that the Giants were in on him. It was basically between the Giants and the Vikings. Will Fries ultimately chose to go to the Vikings on a 5-year, $88 million deal. And the interesting part to me, and I tweeted this right after I saw it, and I went back and looked what time everything was announced because Javon Holland was yesterday morning. I think that was Tuesday morning. So Javon Holland, that announcement happened at like 8:02 a.m. And then the Will Fries thing happened around 9:30 a.m. So I'm thinking, wait, if the Giants were in on a Fries up until the end, there was a possibility that the Giants were going for Adebo, Holland, and Will Fries, which would have been a massive spending spree, really would have gave me some Gettleman and Jerry Reese flashbacks. Now, I will say, in defense of Shane, these guys are young, right? Adebo's 25, Holland just turned 25, Golston's 27, not super young, but James Hudson's 25. Like, the two main signings in Adebo and Holland just reached 25 years old. So they're young guys. It's not like you're signing 27, 28-year-olds where you're probably going to get 1 or 2 years of their prime. There's a chance they get 3 or 4 years of the primes of Holland and Adebo. Now, of course, those two guys are coming off injuries. We'll touch on that. But I don't necessarily look at these signings as Joe Schoen kind of throwing a Hail Mary to save his job. Now, if he got Will Fries too, I forget how old Will Fries is. He can't be that old. He's 26. He'll be 27 actually in about a few weeks here. So yeah, he's older than those guys, but still, he'll have, especially for a guard, they last longer for the most part, so he'll have 3, 4, or 5 good years left, hopefully, for him. But it is pretty crazy that they were going for like 3 big free agents. Now, once again, the price for Holland was actually very reasonable, so I can't complain about that. Anyway, cornerback Paulson Adebo 25 years old, 3 years, and $54 million. I've been a Paulson Adebo guy for a long time. I remember I watched him the year before he was drafted because he was supposed to come out the year before. Then he went back to school for another year. So I started watching him a year early, and like there's some guys you start watching where it's like, whoa, like I love this guy. And that was kind of what it was for Adebo. He just had like these long arms and was an aggressive corner. He played the ball very well in the air, kind of the opposite of what Deonte Banks does, hate to say it. So anyway, Adebo comes into the NFL. He had a rough first couple years. I mean, it wasn't looking great. Then 2023 happens. He plays 15 games, has the best season of his career, and he really took off. And last year, he only played half the year. He broke his femur on that Thursday night game versus the Broncos. I forget what happened. I feel like that game was a blowout. I think Denver won by like 30-something points. But anyway, broken femurs, they're not too common, I feel like, in the NFL. I went back and looked. There was a linebacker, E.J. Henderson, for the Vikings. He had the same injury in 2009. And the year later, he went on to have a Pro Bowl season in 2010 at age 30. So it's a different position, different era, honestly. It's not that long ago, but 2010 NFL compared to 2025 NFL, it feels like it's night and day. And even DeAndre Baker had the same injury, of all people, back in 2020. He did play the next season. Of course, he didn't really do anything. He ended up having not much of a career after that, but DeAndre Baker, he had the same type of injury. It's not too much of a surprise the Giants went cornerback early. I meant early in free agency. I predicted they were going to get Charvarius Ward, who I believe ended up with the Colts. But when I made my predictions, I also made a list of my preferences, and I preferred Paulson Adebo. Once again, I was a big fan of the guy, so I was hoping in my heart that the Giants would get Adebo, and they did, so I was very happy about it. And with what we saw in Hard Knocks over the summer was that Joe Schoen tried to trade up for Kool-Aid McKinstry, who went to the Saints, ironically, and Kamari Lassiter, who went to the Houston Texans. So we knew, even last year with Tay Banks on the roster, that Joe Schoen still wanted another cornerback, a starting cornerback. They brought in Adoree Jackson late last offseason to kind of fill the void, and Adoree actually stayed healthy for the most part and wasn't completely awful, so that kind of worked out. But then the Giants ended up with Tyler Nubin anyway in that second round, so that seems to be working out so far. The Saints, they were man-heavy with Dennis Allen. Of course, he got fired, but he's been more of a man-heavy guy in his career, which makes sense because Adebo is, once again, a pretty aggressive corner. He does get a lot of penalties, which is a downside to him. But you also see plays of Adebo in zone, and his instincts are very good. I feel like he'll hit guys hard. He'll react to the ball quickly. So I feel like in zone-heavy defenses like a Shane Bowen, it can work out. So I'm not that concerned about it. I don't look at him as like a guy that can only play man defense. I think Adebo would be fine in a zone-heavy scheme. He had some forced fumbles last year. I watched his highlights. He had a nice rip on Christian Kirk. He got up and fought for extra yards, and Adebo punched it out. There was a play on DJ Moore where he punched it out as well. So some forced fumbles, and this was interesting as well. So he had 3 interceptions. In 7 games last year. Really, it was like 6.5. And the Giants as a team all season in 17 games had 5 interceptions on the year. So this guy had more than half of the Giants as a team interception total, and he did this in 7 games. So I'm not saying that Adebo's going to come in here and have 6 interceptions next year. It's always possible, but the point is, the Giants need guys that create turnovers, and whether it's the forced fumbles, which I just mentioned, or the interceptions, Adebo has that ability. So that is great to see. This defense needs that. He does give you full effort on tackling. I mean, some corners, of course, are kind of notorious for not really getting too dirty when it comes to making tackles. I think a guy like Sauce Gardner is criticized for that. And even last year, once again, 7-game season, but he did only miss 7% of his tackles last year. And the year before that, in 2023, his breakout year, he only missed 6.2% of his tackles. So he's even gotten better as a tackler. He missed 13% of his tackles in his first and second year, so he basically cut that in half. The guy's been getting better as a football player. He's still 25. At first, the contract was reported as $10 million per year, which would have been insane. And I started thinking to myself, like, is that kind of a bad thing? Because how effed up must his leg be to be worth only $10 million per year? Then we found out it was $18 million per year, so it was too good to be true. And as I said, the downsides are the penalties are a bit high, and he's a bit over-aggressive at times. But outside of that, I think Paulson Adebo is a great find. The Saints, of course, have a lot of salary cap issues, and I feel like if they were in a better salary cap situation, they probably keep him, but, they spent that money on Chase Young, so can't say I agree with that. But anyway, it was a good signing by the Giants. The only concern is he the same guy he was before the injury? And we saw some videos of him working out. He's doing backflips. He's running around. Like, he looks good. So I'm hoping that the injuries are behind him and he has a clean slate of health for the Giants going forward. And if we get that guy that he was in the first half of last year and in 2023, this will end up being a great signing for the Giants. Next up, safety Javon Holland, 25 years old, a 3-year, $45 million deal. As a comparison, McKinney got a 4-year, $67 million deal. The Giants were previously in on Cam Bynum. He went to the Colts, I believe. So he went to the Colts for 4 years and $60 million, $26 million fully guaranteed. So it's like, honestly, I think the Javon Holland contract is better. And I feel like the upside for Holland is higher as well. Because before the injuries, Javon Holland was one of the best safeties in football. I would say top 10 for sure. He was flirting with being a top 5 safety. In 2023, he had this MCL sprain, kept him out for 4 games. Last year, he had a broken bone in his left hand. That kept him out for 2 games. So it's like ever since that MCL injury in 2023, I've seen from Dolphins fans that he has not really looked like the same player. Now, overall, he's been durable. Like, the lowest amount of games he's played in a season was 12 in 2023. So outside of that, he's played 16 games, 17, 12, and 15. So it's like the guy's been durable. He's been a bit banged up, but he does play. He plays pretty much everywhere, mostly free safety for Miami, but a lot of snaps at slot corner, a lot of snaps in the box. He had that sick Hail Mary interception return for a touchdown against the Jets on that Black Friday game in 2023. Don't know how that happened still, but that was really cool. So that was a nice moment in MetLife Stadium. His coverage stats on Football Reference do look really good. Like last year, he allowed only an 89 passer rating in his direction. He only allowed 54% of the passes his way to be completed. And you can see from some of the All-22 clips from Giants content creators that posted them. I think Justin Pennick posted a whole montage, but he covers a lot of ground. So Javon Holland can be a guy who's a center fielder. We know that Tyler Nubin can do the same thing, which is intriguing. So I feel like having 2 good safeties in this defense is important. We saw that happen in Tennessee for Shane Bowen. He had Kevin Byard, he had Amani Hooker. Those are 2 really good safeties when they were in their primes. And now you're going to have a second-year Tyler Nubin. You're going to bring over a hopefully now healthy Javon Holland. And I listened to Mike Renner's podcast. I like a lot of his takes, and he said that Javon Holland, this contract was an absolute steal. So to hear him say that, that's good to hear as well. And this one Dolphins fan said that if you're getting the 2022 and 2023 pre-injury Javon Holland, he's one of the best safeties in the league. But if you're getting the 2023 post-injury or 2024, he's definitely not worth, he said $20 million per year, but of course the Giants got him for cheaper. And he said that not only did Holland look slower after the injury, but his physicality was not the same when it came to tackling. So those are the small concerns. It's if he just gets back to what he was, and he's still 25. He just turned 25, so still a lot of time to grow. He just seems like a guy that hit free agency at the wrong time. If he hit free agency after 2022 or 2023, you're talking about a guy who's going to get Xavier McKinney level numbers, but the Giants hopefully luckily, get him on a discount for 3 years, $45 million. I wrote down and I saw on Twitter Monty had the same thing. He tweeted this, but my dream scenario is that this turns into my adult version of Antrell Roll. Of course, Antrell Roll was signed over from the Cardinals, and he ended up being one of my favorite Giants of all time, and he was really important for that Super Bowl team in 2011, but he was a defensive leader, had a ton of aura. I love Antrell Roll. So he did call MetLife's turf trash. Now, of course, MetLife had changed their turf ever since, but it was in response to Jalen Phillips, who had that injury during that Black Friday game, I think it was, when he tore his Achilles on MetLife's turf, which he's not the only guy to do that, of course. But since then, they changed the turf. So, hey, I mean, hopefully Javon Holland comes over here, stays healthy. And as I said, if he gets back to that same guy he was, I mean, this is going to be a steal of a contract. If he continues to play a bit injured and not look the same, then yeah, he might be worth more of a guy who's $15 million per year rather than playing at a $20 million per year level but only making $15 million per year. So we'll see, but it seems like a risk worth taking. It's a pretty small risk for the most part. This is still a really good player. He's an upgrade over Jason Pinnock, who of course went to the 49ers. And no offense to Pinnock, but he did take a bit of a step back last year. I feel like in 2023, Wink Martindale, Pinnock was a bit better. Last year, he kind of fell off a bit. So it is what it is. I hope he goes to San Fran and has some success. He's a pretty decent player, but you're taking Javon Holland 10 times out of 10. Defensive lineman Chauncey Golston, 27 years old. Seems to be the Azeez Ojulari replacement. So Azeez, it's been real. I was such a happy fan when the Giants took Azeez. Unfortunately, it didn't work out to the level I thought it would. Injuries were a big part of that. But yeah, for Chauncey Golston, 3 years, $19 million, mostly played defensive end, sometimes plays defensive tackle. He has enough size. He's definitely bigger than Ojulari, so he kind of gives the Giants a different look at that third edge rusher position. He has 16 starts in 4 seasons. He had 13 last year, played a career-high 72% of snaps last season. He does have good numbers against the run. He was top 10 in tackles on run plays last year for edge players per PFF. That's more than guys like Nick Bosa, Josh Allen, Khalil Mack, guys that played more, so that's impressive. 5.5 sacks last year, a career high. Very long wingspan of 84 inches. The average for edge guys is 80 inches, so clearly he can make an impact batting some balls down. He's blocked, I think, a couple kicks in his career. Cowboys fans have said he's a high-effort guy. He has stopped some big plays from happening by running guys down. I think a good example of that is Elijah Chapman from that preseason game last year in Houston. Like, when a guy on the defensive line will chase down a running back that might have a chance to score. So apparently this is a high motor guy. And as I said before, it feels like Dorrance Armstrong from last year. Dorrance Armstrong left the Cowboys last season. I really wanted the Giants to sign him. He did have a good year for Washington, but still, this is kind of a different version of it. And speaking of Washington, Golston actually had his first interception last year on Jaden Daniels. It was a great play where Golston was the only one to sniff out a screen pass. Brian Robinson, not the best pass catcher, kind of had the ball go through his arms, and Golston was right there for the interception, so that was good to see. So hopefully more of that in our future here. It gives you good insurance for, Kayvon missed a lot of time last year. Brian Burns was banged up a ton last year. He did play through it, credit to him, but still, like, to have a third guy like Golston, it's good knowing that. And sure, I wish he was a bit younger, but this is still a pretty high upside signing. He can play maybe the most snaps of his career, so I will see what Chauncey Golston brings, but overall, I do like it. Defensive tackle Roy Robertson Harris, 8 years in the NFL for Chicago, Jacksonville, Seattle last year for half a year. He was an undrafted free agent, got a 2-year, $10 million deal. His numbers look terrible. He did have 30% missed tackles last year on Football Reference. That's an atrocious number. Like I mentioned before, that Paulson Adebo was at 6%. This guy's at 30%. Different positions, mind you, but still, 30% is insane. Pro Football Focus has bad numbers for Robertson Harris as well. He did have 2 block kicks in 2024. I think both were extra points, so he's got that going for him. He's 6'5", 290. I'm assuming he's a down lineman. I mean, we saw the Giants play 4-3 and 3-4 last year, mostly 3-4. So I'm assuming he'll mostly be a 3-4 defensive end, more of like a 4-tech type of guy. I mean, we'll see what they put him at next year, but I don't know. It's not the most exciting signing, and of course, there's been some bad stats about him coming out, but I don't know. The guy's been around for a long time. He can't be that bad, I guess. And to be honest, like, having a job next to Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon and now Chauncey Golston, like, it makes your life easier. So I'm not saying, it's not like we're asking Robertson Harris to be like the guy, you're just there to fill in and hold your own weight, basically. So not asking for much there. Offensive tackle James Hudson, 25 years old, 6'5", 313 pounds, a 4th-round pick in 2021 by Cleveland. You would think this is the Josh Azudu swing tackle replacement, but then The Giants made a move today, which makes you think maybe it's not. So the Giants essentially signed 2 swing tackles in this free agency period. Once again, 3 days in. Can they possibly move him to guard? I mean, maybe. I'm not expecting it because I don't think Hudson has any guard experience in the NFL. His contract was 2 years, $11 million, only $3.5 million guaranteed, so it's not too bad from a financial standpoint. He had 17 starts in 4 seasons. His PFF grades were pretty horrendous as well. I looked at Browns Reddit. They were not a fan of this guy, so it's like, some fans had realistic expectations. They're like, yeah, this guy's a swing tackle. He wasn't that bad for that position, but when you go from like Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills to James Hudson, it's gonna look worse. So that's the thing though, like when you're going on the free agent market to find a swing tackle, the guy's gonna have flaws. Like there's not, most of the time, good swing tackles don't hit the free agent market. And if they do, they're going to be signed as starters, not backups. There are times where not a great, but a really good tackle will hit free agency. Like I remember, for instance, I just mentioned his name, Jack Conklin. He went to free agency, I think at like 25 years old, signed that deal with the Browns in 2020. They had a great year, so sometimes those things work out. There's the rare occasion of like a Cam Fleming. He was a solid, I don't want to say stopgap, but a swing tackle, right? The Giants had him for a year, a bit later in his career, but sometimes those guys are out there. But I feel like for James Hudson, the talent's there. They just have to put it together. Apparently, he's not the best on his feet. He also has a lot of penalties and a poor anchor. He did get injured in week 4 this year. He missed the rest of the season. I forget what the injury was, but it wasn't awful. It wasn't like an ACL, Achilles. It wasn't that. I forget though. So anyway, it's a depth piece and we'll see if he's the next guy in line at tackle or if it's this next guy, Stone Forsythe, 27 years old, a 6th round pick in 2021, 14 starts in 4 years. I saw this funny chart from PFF today. The chart is evaluating offensive tackles when left on an island. And at the top right, you have your big dogs. You have Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, of course, 2 Eagles, Tristan Wirfs, Rashawn Slater, Taylor Moton, Colton Miller. On the same exact line, basically, you have Stone Forsythe and Evan Neal, of all people. So I'm not saying he's as bad as Evan Neal, but if you're going off this chart where it's offensive tackles left on an island against their matchup, he's on Evan Neal's level. So take that for what you will, but yeah, not a fan of seeing that. A lot of Seahawks fans did not like him based on their reactions, so once again, take that for what you will. He is 6'8", 307, so he will not play guard. I can't imagine a 6'8 guy playing guard. The PFF numbers are bad. He is a better run blocker than pass blocker, which I feel like if you're the Giants, you kind of want the opposite. Apparently, he has slow feet and he's worse with speed rushers. And I saw, I'm kind of nitpicking here, but I saw that the Seahawks, and of course, he's coming from Seattle, so it's kind of funny, but the Seahawks got Josh Jones, the offensive lineman from Houston. I was a big fan of his in the draft. But someone like that who can play both tackle spots and both guard spots, I feel like that would have made more sense. Like, why are you signing Stone Forsythe and James Hudson, guys who have no guard experience, when a guy like Josh Jones was out there? It was 1 year, $4.7 million. I'm not saying Josh Jones is what I thought he would be entering the NFL, but he's still a guy who plays 4 positions on the offensive line. It feels like you're kind of, pigeonholing yourself to only having swing tackles and not guys that can play guard. Now, apparently, they're going to try to move Evan Neal to guard, which that's a year overdue. I feel like I'm kind of a hypocrite for saying that. I kind of wanted to give Evan Neal one more shot, but they really didn't play Evan Neal last year. So if that was the plan, they might as well put him to guard before last year started. But now it feels like in the last year of his rookie deal, they're going to try out Evan Neal at guard, and I doubt he starts from day one unless guys get injured. But it seems like right now the Giants still have a right guard spot that's open. I mentioned that they tried to get Will Fries. The contract was massive, but it did come down to the Giants versus the Vikings. He picked the Vikings. But right now it's supposed to be John Runyon at left guard and then Jake Kubis at right guard. I don't want to go into next year with Jake Kubis as the starting right guard. But anyway, yeah, aside from nitpicking that last part about signing 2 swing tackles and not going at a guard, aside from that, this free agency so far has been successful in my opinion. So there is still a glaring need at quarterback, right? Darius Slayton was re-signed at wide receiver. I did prefer Josh Palmer. I do like Palmer more. He did get a tiny bit more, I think, on the market. He went to Buffalo. But Slayton's a fine wide receiver 3. He's a perfect 3. I don't think he'll ever be like a solid 2. But Slayton, he will benefit if the Giants get a quarterback that can throw a deep ball, because playing with Daniel Jones the past 5 years has not really did him any favors. They did have a nice connection, but I feel like even when Slayton played with Tyrod, he looked really good. So you get a guy in there that can throw a deep ball, whether it's Rodgers, Russell Wilson has a good deep ball still. If it's one of those guys, or maybe one of the rookies, maybe Slayton takes his game to a different level. We'll see. I think Slayton will always have his issues with drops and catching in contact or playing through contact. Like, he'll always have those issues. But overall, he's still a fine wide receiver 3. So I guess the last domino to fall is Aaron Rodgers, and then we'll probably find out soon. Like, I'm still thinking he'll be a Steeler, but in the event that Rodgers picks the Giants, that's awesome. I just don't know how long these teams are going to wait. And as I said before, there is a doomsday scenario where Rodgers ends up in Minnesota or he retires, Russ goes back to the Steelers, and the Giants are left with nothing. Joe Flacco and Carson Wentz. And then they're going to be kind of forced to draft Shedeur Sanders, which once again, me personally, I'm fine with it. I like Shedeur Sanders, but I know a lot of our fan base, not a lot, maybe like 65% of our fan base does not really love Shedeur Sanders. So it would be crazy if, once again, it's not even just the scenario I laid out. There's a chance that Russ goes to Cleveland, which he's meeting there tomorrow, and then Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh. And at that point, if you're the Giants, you are left with Cooper Rush, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock once again, Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, Gardner Minshew. So unless you want one of those guys as your quarterback 1 next year, which I don't, I guess if I could pick anybody from that list, it's probably Jameis. I hate saying that, but it probably is. But let's just not go there. Let's just not worry about that. Like, let's go out and get Rodgers. Let's make sure we secure Russell Wilson if not. If you're the Giants, I think you honestly, I don't know what is going on behind the scenes with Rodgers, but if you're them, you cannot afford to miss out on both if you're the Giants. I mean, I guess you can, assuming you're getting Cam Ward or Shedeur in the draft. If you're Joe Schoen, especially with your job on the line this year, you're going to want one of those 2 guys. You're not going to want one of those back-end free agent quarterbacks I just listed. So if I'm the Giants, I'm giving Aaron Rodgers a deadline. I know playing hardball with Rodgers is probably not the best idea, but if I'm them, I'm not giving him an ultimatum, but I am giving him a deadline. I'm saying, look, you have until Friday at, 4 p.m. to give us an answer, yes or no. Do you want to be a Giant, yes or no? If he says no, I'm signing Russell Wilson. I don't love it. I prefer Rodgers once again. I think Russ is, more diminished than Rodgers, but I still think Russell Wilson, for a guy not named Rodgers, is still the best guy on the market. So if it comes down to that, then it is what it is. So we'll find out soon, I'm sure, and whenever that decision comes out, I will hop on and make another podcast about it, because I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about with the quarterback situation. I said today on Twitter, and I think a lot of people interpreted this wrong, and honestly I should have just been a bit more clear, but I put that I feel like the Giants' plan is to sign Russ and then trade up for Jackson Dart. Now, I think when I said trade up for Jackson Dart, people thought I meant trade up from 3 to 1. That's not what I meant. I meant you take the best player available at 3, whether it be Hunter or Carter, and then late in the first round, you trade back up into the first round to get Jackson Dart. I would not trade up in the top 2 to get Jackson Dart, no. But what I can see happening is they get Russell Wilson. If I'm reading the situation correctly, I don't get the vibe the Giants love Shedeur Sanders. I hope I'm wrong, because I wouldn't mind him once again, but I get the vibe they're not too into him. And if that's the case, you have Cam Ward's probably going top 2. Then you're left with Milroe and Jackson Dart, or the kid from Louisville who's apparently older than Zach Wilson. So I don't know if that's going to work out. But in that case, I could really see the Giants going Russell Wilson and play him for majority of next year, trade back into the first round to late in the first round to get Jackson Dart. Ole Miss, Eli Manning stamp of approval. Caucasian, mostly a pocket passer. Like, that is the Giants type right there. I had somebody respond to me about that too. It was funny. Someone responded, white dude complaining about someone being white. Can't make this stuff up. I mean, look, I'm not complaining about it, but if you look at the history of the Giants, which is now over 100 years, the Giants have never gone into a season with their quarterback 1 not being Caucasian. So I'm not saying the Giants are some racist organization. I don't want to go on record and say that, but that is just a fact, right? I mean, I'm just putting out there what is true. The Giants, over 100 years, that's a large sample size, have had a type, and Jackson Dart fits that mold. And honestly, I'm not anti-Jackson Dart. I would much rather have Shedeur Sanders. I know some people, and probably some NFL teams, have Dart over Sanders, I prefer Sanders. I think Sanders has faced enough adversity in college with the offensive line issues and having to carry his team at times and being in the spotlight for a lot of his life with his dad being who his dad is. I think he'd handle New York no problem. I think he's a pretty cerebral quarterback, which is needed when your offensive line is not perfect, something that Daniel Jones really struggled with. And I think he'd work out here. So I would prefer Shedeur Sanders, but if they traded up late in the first round and got Jackson Dart, I would not be too mad about it. I can see where they're coming from. I wouldn't want to give up too much. Like, let's say they traded, I think it's the 35th overall pick or 34th, whatever the hell they're picking. I think it's 34 for some reason. So let's say it's 34 and they trade that 99th overall compensatory pick to trade up and get Dart. Like, I can live with that. Obviously, it's a top 100 pick. I don't want to give up 99 for nothing, but if you think Jackson Dart can be a franchise quarterback one day, then yeah, I'm not going to hate that trade. I don't think I'd make it personally, but I wouldn't get on here and rant about it. But yeah, that will do it. It's probably been a long podcast, but hope you guys enjoyed. Once a quarterback decision's made, which I'm hoping is soon because I'm kind of getting tired of this, then we'll come on and discuss it. But yeah, so that's about it. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll talk to you guys next time.